Okay, good morning and welcome to an exciting new project we have on the channel. We're going to be learning a book. It's called Binyan Abayit. I know it looks backwards from here, but you can make it out. The Living Marriage is called A Journey into the Heart of Marriage. What he means by the heart of marriage, as it becomes very clear from the book, is that we're not talking about shalom bayis, getting along with your wife, or at least outside the bedroom. This book is exclusively talking about the bedroom, about intimacy with your wife. The whole book is focused on that. I didn't read most of the book. I will be reading it. I read parts of it. We'll be learning it together, and I'll give you my insights on it. I've been married for 5 years. When I got married, I was told I was learning in yeshiva, my Rosh Yeshiva, the dean of the yeshiva, he basically gave me 7 lessons for marriage. After he told me these 7 lessons, which had nothing to do with intimacy or, the bedroom or sex, you can use the word sex, it's okay. I'm going to be using it a lot in this book because that's what it's talking about. I'm not going to ignore that word, and I'm going to talk about why I'm allowed to use the word. That's very important, why I'm allowed to use the word. People say you shouldn't use the word sex because it's not kadosh, it's not holy, it's not lashon nakiya. Throughout this book, I'm going to explain that real kedusha, real holiness, is to engage in these things and to fully enjoy the sexual experience. That is the purpose of marriage. It is a living marriage. A marriage that's dead usually is dead in the bedroom first. That's where it dies first. If you want to keep your marriage alive, it has to be the main part. The main reason you get married is for the sex, is for the bedroom, and not for that, at least for the companionship that has potential to lead to the bedroom. So that's what this book is about. My dean told me afterwards, he said, yeah, and by the way, those 7 lessons I told you about maintaining shalom bayis, peace in your house, that accounts for 5% of the success of a marriage. 95% of the success of a marriage, you heard from a Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, which was one of the biggest rabbis in Jerusalem, passed away a number of years ago. 95% of the success of a marriage is dependent on how well the couple fare in the bedroom, how well their relationship is in the bedroom. Do they have a proper relationship, proper intimacy, which involves a lot of things. It involves emotions, it involves feelings, it involves physical enjoyment. And when you talk about all these things in the book, this book is written by, based on the teachings of a rabbi, Moshe Shuchatovitz, I think that's pronounced his name. He's a rabbi here in Israel who was a student of Rav Schneur Kotler, which was one of the biggest rabbis in Lakewood, New Jersey, and also the Stipler, I think, Rav Yisrael Yaakov Yisrael Kanievsky, the Stipler, the father of Chaim Kanievsky, who just passed away. He was also a very big gadol. He's been giving these teachings about this topic for, I would say, about 20 years, it says. He wrote a Hebrew book. It's called Binyan Habayis. He asked one of his students, it seems like, or Mendel Weiss, to write it in English, and that's why it's not just based on his personal lectures, his teachings, but it was an expanded version with his own insights, right? Mendel Weiss, plus other stuff that this rabbi or Moshe Shuchatovitz wanted to add in and elaborate and explain more in English language, which is probably going to be, he's putting on bookshelves that are still in common Judaica stores, which is basically opening up a closed topic in the Jewish world, because the concept of sex and the concept of intimacy is really closed off from Haredi Jewish people, ultra Orthodox Jewish people, until they get engaged. Once they get engaged, usually they have a chassan teacher or a kala teacher. The girl will get a teacher who's a woman. The man will get a teacher who's a man who's been married, or he's a rabbi, or both. He's married, and probably a rabbi also. A girl not necessarily a rabbi, or there's no real women rabbis in ultra Orthodox sector, but someone maybe who's the wife of a rabbi, and talk about from a Torah perspective, according to the Torah, what the proper relationship should be in the bedroom. There's a lot of Jewish law that centers around this topic, also halachas, and Shulchan Aruch. It talks about in Siman Reish Mem 240. In Orach Chaim, it talks about a lot of these halachas. There's a lot of halachas which seemingly come from the Gemara. We'll get into that in the book. which things you have to do in the bedroom. There's obligations, and there's also, things that are gray areas you don't have to do. Should you do? Should you not do? We'll deal with both of those topics over here. I want to just start today with the preface and the approbations. I'll just read it over here. The preface: The Living Marriage is an upgraded and expanded translation of the Hebrew book Binyan Abayis, which has helped tens of thousands of couples enhance their marriage over the past 2 decades. This new book was essential in order to expose English readers to the vital information contained in the original book, as well as to provide further clarification of many topics that were not fully explained in Binyan Abayis. The Living Marriage does not address all aspects of marriage, rather it focuses exclusively on marital intimacy, which is one of the essential ingredients of a successful and happy marriage. Although it is directed primarily to the husband, it is also suitable to be read by the couple together. He says, I chose my Talmud Chaver, Rav Mendel Weiss, this is Rav Moshe Shachatavitz, to write The Living Marriage because he is a person of great quality, deep understanding, and broad knowledge, and he has a unique ability to express deep and abstract material in a way that is clear, understandable, and practical to all readers. Now, what he writes over here is what I want to talk about today briefly. It must be stressed that this book has not been influenced in any way whatsoever by modern psychology. So if you're listening to this and you're not Jewish, you're not ultra-Orthodox, and you say, hey, psychologist, Freud, he knew all about this stuff. It is not related. This is completely Jewish knowledge. It is not, because ultra-Orthodox community generally does not espouse of secular knowledge. They reject that. People do not go to university or college. It is entirely built on the words of the living Torah that have been passed down from generation to generation, which I personally received from my teachers, Rav Schneur Kodler, and the Stipler. Although this book has many sources from Chazal and Rishonim to support the points that are presented, he's going to make a lot of cases and present different things that need to be done, not need to be done. How do you deal with certain circumstances in the bedroom? There are sources for this in the Gemara, the Talmud, and in Halacha. The foundations of these teachings were not drawn from these sources. This is a really important line he's saying over here, that all these teachings, let me continue for a second, all these teachings in this book are presented exactly as my teachers taught me. The book also includes other teachings that I personally received from Moshe Feinstein Zatzal, which was one of the biggest rabbis in America of the previous generation, or Yosef Shalom Elyashiv Zatzal, of Chaim Kayevsky Shlita, it's also now Zatzal, he also passed away, and other Gedolei Dor, and each is noted in its place. So basically, this book is based on the teachings of big rabbis, and even though these teachings are supported by words in the Torah, in the Talmud, and maybe from the actual Bible, the source, the foundation, is from their own wisdom, right? According to the ultra-Orthodox sector, especially here in Israel, there's a concept called Das Torah. Das Torah means that big rabbis who are knowledgeable in most of the Torah, their opinion is a better opinion about not just the Torah, but about everything in the world. Any type of issue in the world, whether it be political, whether it be, psychology, when it relates to psychology or socially, any issue in the world dealing with, schooling, education, and, every question that you could possibly have about life should be first go to the biggest rabbi possible, if it's possible, the biggest rabbi that you know, or it's possible, it's accessible, because they have the best knowledge. And if you can't make a decision about something, go to the biggest rabbi. For example, they have elections here in Israel. The sector that I'm part of, the ultra-Orthodox Haredi sector, they ask the biggest rabbi of the generation, now is Rabbi Gershon Edelstein, or Rabbi Chaim Kayevsky just passed away. They ask him, who should we vote for? And that's what they vote for. No one makes their own decisions. They rely on Das Torah because he, as a big scholar, one of the leading rabbonim, has better knowledge of politics than other people. So that's basically what he's saying essentially over here, which is very fundamental. When I'm going to read this book, I have to keep it in mind, is that a lot of the things he's teaching over here are based on what Gedolim have taught him. He was a big student of Gedolim, which are big rabbis, the grand rabbonim in Judaism, especially in the ultra-Orthodox sector. Really, in other sectors of Judaism, there's not so much emphasis placed on Das Torah, on learning things from big rabbis. Rabbis are used to tell you what you should do according to the halacha, according to the laws of the Torah, but other areas, gray areas that are not part of the Torah, they're not explicitly mentioned in the Talmud or the Bible. Everyone's left to make their own decisions or to consult a professional, whatever field you're dealing with, whether it's psychology or education or whatever field you're dealing with. You discuss it with a professional in that matter. Even questions of health or legal issues. Go to rabbis in the ultra orthodox sector. In other sectors of Judaism, do not go there. But this is from a rabbi who's a part of the ultra orthodox sector. So that's a very important point he's making over here, that even though he buttresses a lot of his points from the Torah, from sources in the Chazal and the Rishonim, the source of all these teachings is really, sort of, I guess you call it, oral tradition from his rabbis, and they don't have really sources for it either. They do have some sources, but the basic foundation is not rooted in the actual Torah, which we'll have to discuss. And because it's not rooted in the Torah, I have what to say personally about it, because I can't argue on something that's explicitly in the Torah. Again, Talmud, I wouldn't, as a practicing Jew who believes in the Torah, I would not go against something written explicitly in the Talmud or the Bible. However, where there's various interpretations of what's written in the Talmud or the Bible, you're free to pick the one which makes the most sense to you, I believe. So I just want to read one of the approbations over here. He has a number of big rabbanim who gave approbation to this book, including Rav Chaim Kanievsky. If you live here in Israel, was the biggest rabbi, was the Gadol Ador. Everyone listened to him for everything. Rav Steinman, who was the Gadol Ador, the biggest rabbi before him. Shmuel Orbach, also a big Gadol who recently passed away. He has one from a really long approbation from a rabbi, Rabbi Yeshua Eichenstein. He's a Rosh Hashiva here in Israel. He's currently living. He, as opposed to the other ones who basically just wrote, this is a great, I know this person personally, his teachings are very powerful and help a lot of people. Eichenstein talks about what the topic of this book, and he says, I'm going to quote from the English translation of his approbation, it's a full-page approbation. He's like, the mitzvah of Ona, which we're going to discuss, that seems to be the source that a husband has to be together with his wife, right? Obviously, you have to have children, right? There's a mitzvah in the Torah, there's a commandment in the Torah to regenerate and to have progeny, to have children. According to the halacha, you have to have a boy and a girl, if it's possible. There's a mitzvah Ona, which is, the Gemara in Ksuvos, the Talmud discusses how often you have to be together with your wife. But there's a mitzvah for most people once a week or twice a week to be together with their wife. It's dealt with in the Torah, dealt with in the Gemara and the Poskim in the oral tradition, how the mitzvah should be fulfilled. And these things should not be determined with just savaras. You shouldn't just think about it. Logically, this makes sense. Like in any Dinei Torah, it should be determined by the evidence and by Shimush Talmidei Chachamim. You should listen to the evidence in the Torah as well as listening to the big rabbis. Any preachers from the woman is a Shalom Daraisa. Even abstaining from your wife, right? Right, just like there's a mitzvah, we'll discuss the real problem. The real problem in this book that the author is dealing with is that a lot of people who are from the ultra-Orthodox sector believe that it's more holy to abstain from sexual relations. It's a feeling that you get from staying most of your life in the study hall, intellectually using your mind. People who are intellectuals, just the natural inclination is to detach from the materialism. And they think that people who are learning Torah, a lot of them, think that it's very bad. It's they're degrading themselves to go and be together with a woman. They do it as not as often as possible, as few times as possible, or as short a period as possible, the actual intercourse. So it's coming, he's saying over here, right? Sometimes the Torah dictates that if you are not together with your wife, you're violating a prohibition in the Torah. And just as any mitzvah fulfilling the mitzvah brings him to holiness, says Kachena mitzvosecha, so too the dikta fulfilling the mitzvah according to the Gemara and Poskim, that is the main kedusha as written in the letter. He says it's very important to listen to the Gemara and the Poskim, which is what the author says in the preface is really not what he's saying. He's saying I'm getting my main foundations from what people have just told me, based on oral tradition, based on advice that Das Torah, that Gedolim have, big rabbis have given him over the years. This approbation says it's based on the halacha. I'm going to talk more about how the halacha makes it very difficult in the bedroom, being so medactic, so careful in the halacha. He also quotes, he says, regarding the Ravid in the fourth Kavana, there are Avreichim who have guilt feelings that they have not reached a higher level of Kedusha. He says there's a Ravid, one of the earlier Rishonim, earlier rabbis, 12th century, 13th century, who wrote that by being together with your wife too much, you're not reaching a level of Kedusha. He says you have to be careful with this because sometimes when you desist from marital relations, sometimes it makes the desire more. But his basic idea is that he says the main thing from this Ravid is what it says in the Torah, Simon 240, that if he is not needed, as his heart has not become stronger, and he himself arouses his type, that is serious. As the Ravid elaborates there. So one of the main points over here, this is written and codified in the halacha, that if you do not need to have sex with your wife, you're not obligated to have sex with your wife, and you choose to do so because you enjoy it or you want to, you're bringing your Yetzer Hara, you're encouraging your Yetzer Hara, that is a very taiva, it's a lustful thing, it's a serious thing, and it has to be avoided as much. And that's what the Ravid says, and this is what the author, the approbation, this long approbation states very clearly over here, that it's something that should be taken very seriously. So basically, just to summarize what we're going to have to deal with in this book, why the author wrote a book like this is because seemingly based on a lot of sources, and certainly based on information that was handed over from big rabbis, the general inclination from ultra-Orthodox sector is to try to have Kedusha, holiness, and most people interpret Kedusha, holiness, as avoiding sexual pleasure as much, because sexual pleasure is enjoying the physical world for no purpose, purpose of serving God. You're not serving God, you're serving yourself by deriving benefit from it, and you're lowering your level of it. So how do we deal with that? Because everyone knows if you want to have a normal relationship, a healthy relationship with your wife, and it starts with a healthy relationship in the bedroom, you have to have a little leeway, and you can't be so strict with this. He says this Rav Eichenstein is saying you have to be very strict with the halachas and with not benefiting from the world unnecessarily. We're going to have to deal with all of that in this book. But my personal feeling, that's why I'm giving these lectures over here, is that if you don't want to approach it from the sake of the Torah, I think you have to approach sex and anything in life from a natural perspective. What our nature, human nature is a great thing. I don't believe it should be ignored. And human nature of most normal people is to want to have sex, and want to have sex often, and want to enjoy it as much as possible. So you have to first start off with that. That's the basic human nature. Do things against human nature. We don't assume the Torah is instructing us to go against human nature. At least I don't think the Torah would do that. So we have to reconcile that with the sources, and especially the teachings of these big rabbis, and reconcile all these problems. Is engaging in sex just for pleasure? That's really the premise of the book, just for pleasure and enjoyment. Is that a good thing or is it a bad thing? And how to navigate this very delicate issue in speaking about it and actually dealing with it practically. Stay tuned. Later in the week we'll give the introduction to the book, and the next week we'll actually start with the chapters. Hope you enjoyed. See you in the intro coming up later this week.